Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who Diana happened to be with this last Saturday night.
And she's a pioneer in the world of death and dying for anyone that is not familiar with her. She helped people begin to look at dying, certainly in America.
And she tells a wonderful story about, a heart-rendering story about a woman who was really after her teenage son who, around his T-shirt. You want to tell that story, Dad?
Yeah, she said this woman, very well-dressed woman, came to her hotel one night and shared with Elizabeth this story. We were just with Elizabeth, actually, 76 hours ago, for anyone who knows her and is wondering about her. And she's in Scottsdale, and she's still hanging in there. She's still hanging in there. And this woman shared with her the story about her teenage son, who was 16, and always wore the same T-shirt. Actually, I can understand how he feels. He always wore this. I'm getting to like these clothes. You know, I don't know if Susan's going to get this sweater back. He always wore the same T-shirt. But we're talking about, 2-3 years here in the same T-shirt. And the mother, you can see, was well-dressed and really cared about how she looked, and she would harp on him, and every time she'd be badgering him sort of not wear the T-shirt, not unlike a mom of a teenager. And she shared the story with Elizabeth that he had gone out with his friends about 3 weeks before in a car one night, and the car was in a crash, and her son was killed. And he was killed in that T-shirt. And all she could think about was how much she wanted to see him again, and she would give anything to see him again in that T-shirt. And she buried him in that T-shirt. And so her sense of forgiving herself, the challenge of forgiving herself for having spent all of that time on the petty little things in our lives, but they seem so important at the time. And what it really means to be with someone and to consciously think what really is important. For her, it was the T-shirt. For me, it was the poppy seeds. We all have one of those stories, or most of us have one of those stories in our lives where we can look at where we can forgive ourselves for absolutely honing in on something that completely takes up the space where love could be.
In most relationships that we know, that after the honeymoon period is over, issues around control raise their ugly head, and judgments and unforgiving thoughts begin to occur. So we'd like to demonstrate that to you, that Diane and I have been traveling quite a bit, and I know Diane likes to have her back rubbed, but this isn't very altruistic on my side, because I'm only doing this so Diane will do it to me. So I'm giving to get. It's not unconditional giving. So I said, Diane, it's my turn, and she rubs my back, and that really feels good, and we both got what we wanted, and it looks like we have a very loving relationship. But if we play a different script, and I'm going to rub Diane's back and say, now it's my turn, and Diane says, no, I'm not going to do it, what emotions do I feel?
Anger, rejection, resentment.
Anger. And if we keep the anger long enough, what happens? It becomes hate. So what looked like a love relationship all of a sudden is a love-hate relationship. And so what we often do, because I really don't forgive her for doing this, is if I make her feel guilty, maybe she'll do it my way. So I get a little guilt ball here, and I throw it to Diane, and she catches it.
And I catch it. And now, when we talk about guilt, it's important to note that it has nothing to do with values or conscience. When we talk about guilt, we talk about it as the manipulative tool, the psychological tool that we use to try to control another person or ourselves. So then I'm going to get something that I feel really upset about from the past and add it onto my pile of guilt, and I'm going to throw it back at Jerry.
So we go back and forth in this crazy game of guilt and blame. Sound familiar? Yeah. So it's almost like a tug of war that we feel that I'm right and she feels that she's right.
Is like the fear of love. We use guilt as a way of keeping ourselves separate from intimacy with another person. If I say to myself, well, why would I possibly want this guilt? If guilt is a way to suffer, it's a decision to suffer, or to try and make somebody else suffer, and I know that, and I consciously say, I don't want that in my life, then why would I possibly hold on to it? Jerry just said that we only hold on to a belief system when there is value in it. And of course, guilt is only a belief system. You know, it only exists inside your head. Newsflash. It only exists inside your own head. And so the reason that I would want to hold on to it would be at a core level, I don't really believe I deserve the right to be happy and to know peace in my life. I think I believe I deserve just to suffer in my life. So if I become aware of that and then make my choice, what can I do? Can I let go? Can I stop playing the game of guilt? I can? You think I can? Can I? Okay, well, you know what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to let go because I don't want to play the game anymore. I'm going to make choices for myself. Now, Jerry, you can let go.
Well, does this mean you're not judging me anymore?
Yes.
Means you've forgiven me?
Yes.
But you don't want anything to do with me?
I've forgiven myself. No, I do. I want it, but I don't want to play the game.
You want to play the game? Okay.
I don't want to play the game.
Well, Diane is a much more spiritual person than I am. I like playing the game, so I'll find someone else to play the game.
Robin went, yes,
And that's something that's very easy for us to do, and we tend to do that until I wake up and decide that that's not really bringing me peace. And until I want peace of mind and realize that that game doesn't bring me that, then that will be the day I will stop believing that I want to live my life around blame and guilt.
But there's always going to be a willing partner to play, whether it's Robin or somebody else. We have to basically decide, do we want to play the game? Or do we want to stop playing the game and make choices to go forward?
Several years ago, someone at our center who had been there for some time, and I wasn't aware of it, who had been a survivor of Auschwitz, came to me and said that he'd found attitudinal healing extremely helpful to him in letting go of some of the scars and some of the scratching of the scars that kept bleeding inside of him, and thought that people who in the San Francisco Bay Area who were similar could utilize attitudinal healing, even though they had a lot of other kinds of help in the past that hadn't seemed to help. So I had a group of about 12, 13 people. These people were, by and large, between the ages of 14 and 17 during the war. Many of them had been in several camps. One person, I remember, a very successful businessman, every time he went by a smokestack, he would smell the odor of burnt flesh. And as we began working with each other, found that they really never shared very much of their experiences with their own children. But as their grandchildren came into being, they weren't going to be around that much longer, and somehow they began to share some of this information with their grandkids. And a lot of healing began to take place in having their stories heard. There's one man who was a professor of sociology. He went to Germany to find one of the guards that was over him at the time to confront him. And when he found him and found what a mess this guard's life was in, and he began to wonder, well, who was the victim? Who was the victim? And he continues to go back every year and brings this guard gifts rather than anger.
Food, because the man is broken and poor. And
I had an opportunity, I guess it must have been 9 years ago, while I had this group to go to Poland. I was writing a book, One Person Can Make a Difference, and was interviewing Walisa. And I decided to go to Auschwitz myself. And it was absolutely the worst experience in my life. And the spiritual principles that Di and I are talking about went out the window. And I just couldn't believe man's inhumanity to each other. And I came back with terrible, terrible judgments about what happened there, and caught with a lot of anger, a lot of rage. And what happened was that these people I've been working with that I see every week began to help me heal my relationship with what I had experienced. It was a very remarkable experience for me, but only demonstrating when we really see each other as equal teachers and students, remarkable miracles begin to happen.